Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Keyword Crypto podcast with Michael and JJ. Follow us, keywordcrypto.com, and on Twitter, at keywordcrypto and at keywordcryptojj. Check out our Patreon page if you'd like to support us, and let us know on social media if there are certain guests you'd like to hear on the show. And with that, enjoy. Welcome to the Keyword Crypto podcast. All right, everyone, quiet on the set. We're beginning the show right now.
Keep it in. Just keep it in.
I'm JJ. I'm here with my co-host, Michael. This is the Keyword Crypto podcast. Happy New Year. Happy 2020. Special guest, Nako Mbelle.
There you go.
Is the way to pronounce her name. CEO of FinTech Recruiters, Inc., a relatively new company. Is that right?
We've been around for 5 years. Going on
5 years.
Yeah, which is bananas to me.
I was looking at your some of your work history on LinkedIn, and I saw that you had done some work with Exodus and some other companies as a recruiter. So I just assumed that FinTech Recruiters was a new thing. So one of the things on this show that we're going to try to do more in 2020 is kind of try to get away from a lot of the drama that we're used to in the crypto space.
I don't know if that's going to be possible, though.
It's not possible.
I think one thing we're going to want to do is talk to people who are building and creating and, the sort of boots on the ground in crypto. And what a great place to start with you. So what can you tell us about you and your business and all that?
Yeah. So I got into Bitcoin before the insanity, I call it. I got in just before it went parabolic in 2017. So I got in right after Mike Hearn rage quit. Do you guys remember that? It was mid 2016, mid to late.
Was this on Twitter? Or in life?
I literally bought Bitcoin. Took it seriously, started really looking at it and taking it seriously. But I fell in accidentally. I was, doing FinTech recruiting, and it was mostly FinTech. I had nothing to do with crypto, but I had a client who wanted to know if I would accept Bitcoin. And I thought, well, is it money? Can I just convert it? And he said, yeah. So I thought, okay, yeah, I'll accept it. But then, the daunting part came. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to accept this? So I went on YouTube, like many of us do, and started, learning about how to set up a wallet. And back then, everybody pretty much had wallets on blockchain.info, right? That was the place to get your wallet. So I downloaded that and, just kind of had to teach myself, how do I accept this? And it was extremely intimidating, because I'm not technical. I'm not a developer. And yeah, just pretty much I'm curious, but I wouldn't consider myself somebody that's very technical. So I was terrified that I would lose it, or, how do I transfer it to the exchange? It was just, the learning curve was painful, and I don't even think really nice wallets were around. Not to say that the blockchain wallet wasn't nice, but
it's okay. It's still a complete disaster there.
Yeah.
2016 was hard. I mean, that was right when Coinbase was starting to pick up, but even
2020 is not that much better. I mean, it's not like we've made it so my mom can easily do it. And the fact that somebody in fintech who works in fintech is trying to accept payment in Bitcoin is overwhelmed by it. That's something we need to be aware of. If the people who are trying to help developers get jobs and try to recruit people is having difficulties with it, you should be the first group of people to be able to easily accept it. like you should be, in wave one, like you should be our target audience, or, you should be not our, because I'm not a coder, but you should be the target audience. And so I think that's a pretty good indicator of like where we are as a technology so far in this space. That, so then how did you fare after the first year? Did things get easier? Do you feel more comfortable with it now? And
Well, wallets like Exodus, which take into account the user,
yeah, that's true.
it's just beautifully designed and a lot easier, So, but I hadn't found out about that until later. I was still using my blockchain wallet, and I even downloaded the entire Bitcoin wallet. So I was using the QT, and then I had to learn how to back that up. And
That's what I made that same exact mistake.
yeah. So, but in retrospect, I kind of look back at it and I think like it was good. I think those of us that are still in Bitcoin, you kind of have to get bruised up a little bit, to, yeah, because it does, right? It really does. So, and it just forces you to learn, to learn more about it. And those of us who were pre-SegWit, we had to learn about SegWit and why people were against it. And so I look back at that, as painful as it was. I look back at it and I realize, okay, I'm in this for the right reasons, because I understand it at the, at a level, I can't read the code, but I understand it enough that I'm willing to invest as much as I've invested, because I really believe in what we're doing. And I kind of, had to teach myself and figure it out, because the space, unfortunately, isn't very friendly to people who are non-technical. It just isn't.
Tell me about it.
So, now, would you equate those bruises to something like having your first checking account and not knowing what overdrawn is and and things like that, where people get bruised up with checking accounts when they're young?
Oh no, nothing like that. Are you kidding me? When I first saw an address, I just literally had like anxiety. I was like, oh my God, this is why do they call this an address? There's so many things in Bitcoin where the words do not equate to what it actually means. Like a wallet. Like it's not a wallet. Should be called a keychain, right?
Really
because
good point.
it's never really downloaded into your computer.
Exactly,
and that took me 2 years to figure that out. Like nobody told me that. I just kind of had to learn the hard way, because, I had a wallet that had a wallet on two computers, and it was sort of getting mixed up. And Exodus actually tries to help the user by telling you that you can only have your wallet on one machine, which we know isn't true, but they do that because it'll mess you up, right? And so that's when I kind of realized, like, oh, this actually doesn't leave the blockchain. Like it just, you just get access, right? So little things like that. I think the words are all off. Those are my beefs. Is that it's just the marketing. I love Satoshi. Thank you for this technology, but he was not a marketing guy. Like,
I put out a tweet a couple of days ago that got a little bit of pushback from people, because I said, can we grow up and stop using memes and stop using all this stuff? People are saying, well, these words like surfing the internet still around. I'm like, yeah, but it's a physical image that you can put in someone's head, and they understand how the technology works, because all this information's going through the pipes, and you're going all over the world doing all these different things. So that's one of those images that people can use to relate to the infrastructure of the internet. But wallet doesn't help anybody understand the infrastructure of Bitcoin. I don't I try to explain it to people. They're like, wait a minute, but then why is it called a wallet? Because you don't have the Bitcoin in your pocket.
Yeah.
And like that really throws people off. And like you said, a keychain, people understand they're giving you the key to the door that holds the Bitcoin. And all you're doing, like, you never have it in your wallet. You just have the key, and you access that door. And that makes a lot of sense. People can physically understand that.
remember for a long time I couldn't understand the difference between the private keys and my seed phrase. I was like, wait, what are my private keys exactly? And because people say never share your private keys with anyone, never put them on the internet. And I'm thinking like, wait, what are my private keys? Have I ever seen them? That's one of those things. So Nako, you have a lot of experience in fintech as a recruiter, and in 2016, you discover Bitcoin because you receive a payment. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you accept it, and you think, okay, we'll try this out, and it opens up this world of pain for you. It sounds like this difficulty, but it also sounds like it was intellectually interesting for you, and that's one of the reasons that you got into it. Or why are you still in crypto if you have these issues with it?
Yeah, great question. So I am intellectually curious. So that was the first hook for me. It was like, oh, this is interesting. And I've never considered myself much of an early adopter. Like I was one of those people, I'm going to date myself. I kept my BlackBerry for a while because I'm like, I don't understand what's the big deal. A phone's a phone, And when all my friends had iPhones, I was like, yeah, whatever. It took me a while to get an iPhone, and now that I have an iPhone, I'm like, oh my god, what was I thinking? So I wouldn't even consider myself, like I said, I'm not technical, but the philosophy behind Bitcoin intrigued me. When I read the white paper, which surprisingly was a lot easier to understand than I thought it would be, I just like, this dude, this is political. Like right away, I just understood like this is a political movement. And for I know people can't see me, but I'm African. I'm an African woman in Canada. That's why I have the accent. But I just saw this as just liberating for people who have been historically excluded from finance. I just saw it right away, and was really excited by it.
At what point did you read the white paper? Was that like kind of a right away, I've got to learn as much as I can about this, or was that later on?
It was later on. It was after I had watched a couple of YouTube videos, particularly Andreas. I watched a lot of his videos. He really was simplified things for me, and I really enjoyed listening to him and realized that this was a movement about freedom, and a lot of the values of the community aligned with my own values. And I'm also, it's one of those things that you don't want to really admit to people, but I think that I am risk seeking. I'm a risk seeker. Like it's in my personality. I don't mind taking risks, and I don't mind speculating, which is now a bad word. But I just don't mind it. It's not something that keeps me up at night. I'm comfortable with risk. So there were just a lot of things that kind of aligned personally, and so it just seemed like a natural thing for me to really want to dive very deeply into. So much so that I started to focus more on Bitcoin, and not just Bitcoin. I'm gonna out myself. Also crypto. I was a part of that insanity, and I worked with some ICOs, and also got into Ethereum pretty early on, but had no idea that it would go to where it went. I made some money, but not enough to retire, is what I tell people. Yeah, I got into all of that because I really felt like, oh my God, that not only do I love the audaciousness of the space and the audaciousness of Satoshi to say, listen, we have an alternative, and we no longer have to hit the streets and protest. We can use our brains, and we can use our the ability to encode values that we agree on and create a parallel system. Like it was the biggest FU it just made me excited. I was like, oh man, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this tribe who's so audacious that we think we can, compete with the financial system. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. Were you involved at all in the Occupy Wall Street movement in 2009?
I watched from the sidelines. I didn't protest. I just didn't, but I totally agreed with it. I felt very connected to the people that were on the streets.
What was your role in finance at that time? I mean, you were working in the industry, right?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin's taught me so much about myself. I think I'm the personality type that saw banks as being very paternalistic.
Mm-hmm.
I and the way I managed my money, it was very much like I need somebody to tell me what to do. So and despite the fact that I have these sort of anarchist leanings, quote unquote, I was still very much very infantile, when it comes to money. So, I had mutual funds, and I had like somebody that I would talk to about, what I should do with my money, how much I should invest. And what happened with the crash, I was old enough to sort of understand it. I wasn't a kid. It made me really angry. And when I saw The Big Short, and then I read the book, I just wanted to, I was so pissed, but I felt powerless. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm just, just this person that I don't really have much power. And then comes Bitcoin. I'm like, holy crap, man, this is the answer. Like, this is the best way to protest. Like, forget hitting the streets, man. Let's vote with our wallets, because that will get their attention. So, yeah.
So when you're in Canada, and so we have different vernacular here. So I wanted to clarify, when you say you're African, do you mean you're from Africa and now you live in Canada?
Yeah, my background is Tanzanian from East Africa.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm African Canadian, like literally.
So how old were you when you moved to Canada?
Well, see, this is where it's kind of weird. Here when you look like me and your name is as exotic as mine, everyone will ask you, where are you from? So I was born here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I am Canadian, but because we're immigrants, it's, you still have a very strong tie to
Gotcha.
to where your parents are from.
And do you go back there a lot, or do you still have family back there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My brother lives there. I have a lot of family there still. And so I'm still very connected, and I'm going to be going this year. So, and I've lived there. And I shouldn't leave out my mom's side. She'll be upset. So my mother is actually from the Caribbean. So I'm a cultural mix. My mom is from Trinidad and Tobago. And I've lived there as well, and did some schooling outside of Canada as well. So I think that's, I'm a bit of a global person because I've lived in different countries. And that's also why I think Bitcoin really appealed to me, because I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, people take for granted how easy it is to bank here, how easy it is to.
That's why I brought it up, because it's like, as a Canadian, you're almost like an American in the sense of, and to go back, what Andreas always says is like, if you don't understand what it's for, it's not for you. Yeah. He always says that. And so like people in Africa, they understand that kind of stuff because we have ease of use, access to capital, access to banks, access to loans. It's like, it's so commonplace for us in America that most people don't fully understand the need for it when I try to explain it to them, versus people in other countries, other continents, where, like you said, like, you understand the need for it right away. Like your family and this and that. And so that's why I really find it interesting when people who aren't from, or who have ties to people outside the country, they seem to get it right away. Versus when I talk to people here, they just, even after a week, they're still like, I just don't get, like, why do you need it? I can use my credit card.
I've never been to Africa, but what, Nako, is banking and finance like there or in the Caribbean? Can you describe it? I mean, why in your opinion is crypto something that's going to change the world in those places?
The Caribbean's a little different. Well, at least actually I could say most English-speaking islands are very, very developed. Their banking system is extremely developed. I bank with a bank called the Royal Bank of Canada, and they have Royal Bank of Canada branches in the Caribbean. So I can use my debit card there like I'm here. It's completely connected. They don't have a problem at all.
Yeah.
The problem, however, becomes it's more of a macro issue in the Caribbean. They had a lot of banks, private banks, and I guess you can call them offshore type of banking that was used for a while. And then when the regulatory requirements changed, a lot of those banks pulled out. And I think it was like probably after 9/11, everything changed, the banking, right? The AML regulations. Yeah. And so a lot of the Caribbean nations sort of are now faced with like almost a shortage of options. They're sort of at the whim of the North American banks, and so Bitcoin is a bit of a hedge for them and an equalizer in many ways. Africa, on the other hand, the countries differ based on their banking. So South Africa, the banks are very, they're like Western banks pretty much. They don't have the same issues as other African countries, like Nigeria, which is like they've pretty much been excluded from the financial system in many ways because of the amount of fraud that they've experienced over the years, and so it's really hard to get money in and out of Nigeria. For the most part, I think you can probably use things like PayPal, but I think that transferring money directly, I've spoken to Nigerian friends, like if you were in Nigeria and you called your bank and wanted money transferred, it's really hard. And I think that's part of why, God, I don't remember his name. Oh, this is so embarrassing. But that football player now that's like a huge Bitcoiner. What's his name? The guy that's, he's an influencer.
I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember his name either.
Yeah, I can't remember
him with pictures of charts. Yes.
Yeah, and he I think he's sponsoring BTC server pay. He's got like I don't know. I think he branded his shoes or his cleats with BTC server, so he's like all in. And the reason is because he went to, and this is like a multimillionaire, right? He's an NFL player, and he went home and he ran out of money because he was partying a lot. And he called his bank. He's like, "Oh, I'm in Nigeria. I'm in Lagos. I need X amount." And they're like, "We can't send it to you. Like, we don't send money to Nigeria." And he couldn't believe it. He was like, "What? But it's my money." And that's when it clicked for him. Like, "Oh, it's not my money." So in Africa, banking is a difference from country to country. I know in Tanzania, in our case, it's not as restrictive. And I can wire transfer money to my brother fairly easily. But they're like serious controls. And at one point when I was sending a transfer, like they wanted to know exactly what it was for and, why we were using it, why I was sending it, and all of these questions. And then they wanted an invoice. I'm like, this is personal. Like, it's not, we're not doing it, it's kind of none of your business either. Right. Like it was crazy. So,
like the assumption is guilt, not innocence. And that's in those situations. And it's just like, I'm not a criminal. Like, what are you doing? Like,
but they make you feel that way. They make you feel that way for sure.
Yeah.
They probably just need a record of everything just in case, but who knows?
Yeah, they think everyone's a terrorist, I guess. I don't know. But when you're there, getting a loan is extremely expensive. It's like 20% is the interest rate.
Oh, wow.
And
in in Tanzania or Nigeria, you're saying?
In Tanzania. I can only speak for Tanzania in terms of like how it is locally. Yeah, the loans, although it might be changing, they're trying to make things a little bit easier for people to get mortgages, because that's something that is relatively new to our society. We, when you have a house, like, you built it with cash. So everyone's home and their cars, like, what you see is owned. Everything is owned. So people, save their money and then they build their house. And so the whole mortgage concept of a mortgage is relatively new, because it's just, banking is still is very much an elite part. Not very many poor people have.
Have you noticed any awareness of cryptocurrencies in Africa?
Unfortunately, a lot of scams have happened.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
With Bitcoin. And so, even my brother, like, I'm really trying to get him into it, and he's just like, there were Ponzi schemes here, and that used Bitcoin as I guess, as sort of the gateway.
Yeah.
And I've heard of that in South Africa and Kenya. So unfortunately, I think it's left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But I know that in Nigeria, it seems, when I speak to some Nigerian friends that I have, it's a lot more, Nigerians are way more receptive to it because of the devaluation of the Naira. I mean, it's so crazy how much devaluation their currency has gone through, that they're way more risk seeking, if you will, and they're willing to bet on Bitcoin. I think more than any other African nation at this point, maybe with the exception of South Africa. I heard South Africans are pretty, despite all of the scams that have happened in South Africa, they're still willing to hedge on Bitcoin. And I know in Nigeria, I think there are almost like 10 exchanges, and 3 or 4 of them are local to Bitcoin. I'd be interested to learn more about what's happening in Uganda. I don't have anybody in Uganda or any Ugandan friends, so it'd be kind of interesting to find out what's going on in Uganda, because Binance opened a Uganda branch.
That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know Jack's been going out there and tweeting about it nonstop, about his travels to Africa.
And Jack Dorsey.
And
there's a lot of speculation about Africa being kind of a hub of technology in the future. At least people are writing about it, and I wouldn't be surprised, especially since a lot of people from what I read, is that people rely on mobile technology even more than they do in the United States and Canada, and so that kind of development just happens out of necessity. And I wonder if crypto is one of those things that will grow when people really need it the most. Like, as you say, in Nigeria, the devaluation of their currency will lead to this safety door, which is crypto, rather than be from the scarlet letter of scams and Ponzi schemes that we have to carry around with us. It'd be interesting to see how Africa develops in that way.
And I wanted to ask you, like, what's your take on? I know you said it's kind of about, like, Bitcoin's kind of about freedom, but I wanted to get your take on Africa as a continent. Obviously, I mean, it's a lot of countries and a lot of different cultures and communities, but Africa as a continent tends to skew not as wealthy as North America, and so just the ability to actually mine Bitcoin. Is there a lot of mining of Bitcoin in Africa compared to, like, Russia, China, and North Africa? Because it seems like my frustration with Bitcoin, as a lot of the listeners know, is it still seems like a gateway, and the keys to that gateway are held by the rich people who can afford to mine. And so users of Bitcoin are still like beholden to the miners, and we're just trading one freedom for another. And
that's a good question.
And that's what I get frustrated with. So like, since have more contact with people out there, like, do you see that infrastructure being built to mine and have more control over the actual currency itself?
Yeah, I think there's a huge misconception that that there isn't a lot of wealth in Africa. You have to kind of go there to see it.
Mm-hmm.
The image that is portrayed in the media is so not correct.
Okay.
And that's not to
You
say
mean
that
the media incorrect, really?
What? No way. You mean it's not all Ethiopian children starving? That's all we see out here.
And
oh my God.
exactly. Like I think, I don't know. A part of me is like, is it a conspiracy? Like, I don't understand it. I really don't, because yes, we've got poverty. Are there places where there's no running water? There's no electricity? Yes. But imagine if people outside of the US only saw like the tent cities in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, that was their view of San Francisco. It's like, oh, this is San Francisco, and when you come, this is what you're gonna see. Like, it's just, or if you were to go like in the backwoods of, I don't know, Virginia or Louisiana or wherever, and you were to see people, living in poverty, right? Like, it's just, I don't get it. I don't understand it. And, I don't know. I don't even know what to say.
It's probably just media. Like you said, it's media. I mean, there's two possible things in my mind. Is Hollywood is worldwide at this point, and Hollywood movies have always usually shoot out of the big cities, and so people all over the world are seeing that. And and we're not getting a lot of. I know there's a big Nigerian movie industry, but we're not getting a lot of that stuff out here. Even though more and more people are becoming aware of it and actually investing in it because they're shooting so much out there. But maybe it's just, and it also could just be like deep-seated racism of
That's
like
what I was thinking.
white people just keeping this image of Africa as poor and less than, and just to like make themselves feel better. It could just be that, and just try to keep it down.
Yeah, it makes me sad. Like, before I used to get really angry, but now I'm just like, it's just sad. It's, because my family, we're not rich, it's like, there's a middle class. We're the middle class,
sure.
And when you think of, enough Americans, I think, who've, gone to college or university, like, you're going to come across some African students. Like, where do you think they came from? Like, do you think, like, my dad studied here, and imagine that was like in the 70s, African students were coming here to study. It's like, it's just so frustrating. And
well, so let me clarify. Sorry, because I don't want you to get the impression that that's what I was thinking. I was thinking more of just per capita. So right. I know there's huge cities in Nigeria and huge cities in South Africa and huge like humongous industrialized cities. I just mean like per capita as in like an overall wealth. So out here, our middle class is being decimated. So our capital per capita is actually decreasing. And so like how's the per capita is the average person like blue collar middle class in like in Africa? So I think that's what I was saying. Is like I meant from like an industrialized infrastructure term is like, are you seeing a lot of wealth and capital investing in Bitcoin mining?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I think.
So sorry if I gave you the wrong impression in the first question.
No.
I'm glad you asked for clarification.
Yeah, no, you didn't give me the wrong impression. Not at all. Sorry if I came across as defensive. But,
no.
Yeah, so I think that there's enough wealth that we could have mining in certain countries. I think that unfortunately, and this is, something that as an African, it just really makes me mad, is that we have a lot of corruption. So it's no longer, I'm not one of those people, like, I don't think we can blame colonialism anymore. It's like, I'm just tired of that song.
Yeah.
We've been in power for too long to continually keep blaming the past. Our politicians have sold us down the river, and they're greedy and corrupt. And so the wealth is there, particularly among the oil producing nations. There's a country called Guinea. Oh man, I talk about it and literally my blood boils. I am so angry. They have a lot of wealth, a lot, and it's the sort of the stereotypical African dictator that you hear about. Like, that's what this country is like. Okay, fresh strawberries flown from Paris. If they want pizza, they'll fly to Dubai. Like, it's that outlandish and crazy. When Mike Tyson got a tiger, like that's the kind of behavior we're talking about, right? Like, just
that's in Guinea, like west coast of Africa.
Yeah. Guinea-Bissau, just bananas. And the people, the infrastructure is terrible. The people live in, extreme poverty. But the son of the president has like 5 yachts, and lives like a sheik, like, just disgusting. So the money is there, the wealth is there. It's just the leadership is lacking, right? And this is why I think Bitcoin is, can empower people, the right people, but in terms of the mining, we just need the political will. Like, if we had somebody that was smart and took their time to understand Bitcoin, and that's why I was really excited about Binance going into Uganda, because I think that Ugandans, they'll slowly come around. Like, they'll figure it out eventually. Although they have a guy that's been in there for 40 years or some insane, he just refuses to give up power.
And they're letting
he's
in
not stupid.
Like all the Christian right people who are telling them to kill all the gay people right now. Right?
God.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. That's another big thing.
A whole
there.
different thing. So I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that
for
road.
Sure.
But also, obviously stereotypes exist for a reason. Africa's fucking hot, and mining produces so much heat and energy that it seems like most people who have the funds to build a miner, they're like moving to Iceland, or they're moving to Moscow, or they're moving to really cold climates, so they don't have to not only spend the money to mine, but then also spend the money to cool the machines. Like, somebody said they were building a mining farm in Texas, and I was like, why the fuck would you go to Texas? It's one of the hottest places in America. And just the cooling costs alone would like almost double your mining costs. And so I couldn't figure out why they were doing that. But then again, like, I don't know. Like, I'm not, uber technical guy, but that was just my initial instinct. And so it's like, do you see that getting in the way at all either?
It's if someone were able to build close to, like, at the height of Kilimanjaro, because Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa, it's snow peaked, right? Yeah. It's cold. Like, you have to, if you're climbing that summit, you need gear that's going to keep you warm. It's not Iceland, but we do have. I never know American. I can't. I don't remember. I don't know Fahrenheit. My Fahrenheit's bad, but it can get as cold as like 10 degrees in parts of Africa. Like in Nairobi, it can go down to 10 degrees. It can go down to,
and that's just like in the normal parts of the city.
Yeah, it can get temperate. It's weird. Like, do you ever see South Africans wearing sweaters and like knit caps?
Yeah.
Right, that's because it can get temperate. Like, it's very strange. And in fact, the most temperate places where it can get cool because 10 degrees is cool for Africa.
That's
And I remember when
that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit for all you Americans.
Yeah. And I remember when I first experienced, I was like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on? The deserts can get, especially like the interior of the countries, of certain countries, it can get, the temperature can drop and get a little cooler. So, and in fact, where white people settled in Africa, those are all the temperate places, right? Kenya, South Africa.
Okay.
Like they were like, no, we're staying away from the super hot places. It's like, but yeah, I'm going off on a tangent here.
You had critiques about the interface of Bitcoin. What do you think about the network as a whole? And do you think that this is something that can work?
That's a really good question. I think that we're really, really early. And I was speaking to a developer the other day who, he's been around for a while, and he said, Nako, the early days of Linux there was so much vitriol. There was so much infighting. There were lots of forks. We didn't care if, I think his name is Linus. I don't know what his name is, but the guy that invented Linux, people like railed against him. And if you go to the map of sort of the development of Linux over the years, you're going to see like a ton of forks. And if you go to the archives, you're going to see people just bashing away at each other about, various technical difficulties. And they managed, right? Like years later, look at where Linux is now.
And we only have 17 forks now. It's like,
yeah.
Aren't there like a million different forks still of Linux?
Yeah. Yeah. So he's like, it's one of those things that, and even the early internet, right? They had their wars as well. And so people tend to forget all of this. And so I think that a lot of the limitations of Bitcoin, which there are many, as we know, I think we'll overcome them with time, and I think that I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, YouTube, maybe more than that, maybe 30, 40 years ago, YouTube and Netflix would not have been a possibility because of the bandwidth issues, right? We just didn't have the technology to support it. And I think Bitcoin is very, very similar. I think we live in a culture where, people just want everything right away, instantly, like a microwave culture. You just want to microwave it and it's done. And I think we're still very early in. And, but I think the foundation that's been laid, and the fact that Satoshi solved the double spending problem, which I think is like, that's really what was the only thing that was left, right? Everything else has been done prior to him or her or them, whatever. And I think he made it clear and sort of gave credit to the what do you call them? The cypherpunks as paving the way for what he did. So I just think, I think we've got a long way to go. I'm in it for the long haul. I don't see us being a currency anytime soon. I think that ship has sailed, man. It's just not effective. But I think as a store of value and as a protest, like I don't think people talk enough about the political implications of Bitcoin. I think it's more political than it is technical. I really do, because I interview developers, man, who understand the technical. They understand the tech, right? And they get it. They can read the code. I can't read the code, but they still are not Bitcoiners. And I used to rack my brain, like, how come these guys, they can read the code, they understand the tech, but why don't they get it? And it finally took me a while to realize it's because it doesn't speak to them politically. And I think Bitcoin is a political movement. And if we can frame it like that and market it like that, because that's really where you're going to find the people who are in it for the long haul, because we're making a political statement. It's not just about the tech. I think the tech will eventually come, but for me, it's so exciting that I have a technology that represents my values, and I feel like sticking it to the man, so to speak, every time I stack my sats,
So so here's a question for everybody, everyone listening and everyone here, is like, how do we market crypto? How do we market Bitcoin? Because, there's no marketing department or whatever. How do we do that while still being critical of what it is now? Because that's the problem in the space. That was the problem of 2019, was you've got Bitcoin maximalism and you can't say anything negative about Bitcoin and you can't value any other cryptocurrency. But that's obviously very bad marketing. And that doesn't allow Bitcoin or crypto to grow into what it can be in the future. So I just don't know if we all have to be like really honest evangelists or something.
Well, it also, I wanted to ask, not go to expand on your thoughts of Linux, is because with Linux back then, there weren't people building from the ground up competitors to Linux, were they? They were doing forks of it and saying this fork's better, that fork's better. Whereas now people are building entirely different infrastructures to Bitcoin that they say are better and they say fixes all those problems, because we now have the ability to have 17 different competitors that aren't necessarily even just forks and have nothing to do with the original code. And so do we need to focus on the original, even though we now have the ability to build something from the ground up in a year or two that's just as good or better?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I actually think the competition is good. I do believe in sort of the survival of the fittest. I think that although sometimes the best tech doesn't win, as we know, history has shown us, right? Like Beta Vision was supposedly way better than VHS, and VHS won. So,
Yeah.
so I think that, but I think competition is healthy, and I think I wish that maximalists would go back to the narrative of everything is a test net and we welcome it, like bring it on, you know. And that used to be the narrative before. They weren't vilified and scams, and just because you don't agree with something doesn't make it a scam. Like that word is so misused. It drives me crazy. It's like,
Yeah.
there are people who really believe in what they're doing. They might be wrong, but it doesn't mean that they're scamming people,
Yeah.
right? And the irony, I think, of the Bitcoin maximalists sort of blasting everybody that's not 100% Bitcoin is that we're supposed to be the freedom people, like freedom of thought, so people should be free to make their own mistakes. Like if they get scammed, they'll learn. Like I actually think it's good to get scammed. I'm one of those people. I'm like, if I get scammed once, believe it's not going to happen again. Like
Yeah.
scamming serves a purpose. Like sometimes you need to get burned, and
I guess so. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think that part of the frustration is that the more people that get scammed, the more we have to carry that around that's the scarlet letter, basically, is that people are going to get scammed. So I assume that the maxis are like just straight up everything is a scam. We got to focus all our energy on Bitcoin. That is the fastest way for us to get adopted. And I don't know. I agree with you. I think that we need to let the scams happen. Let everyone learn if that's what it takes. Although I also know lots of people that never learn that too. So, but
Yeah,
Yeah. But like people eventually stop touching fire at some point, no matter
yeah.
how dumb they are. Some people just take longer than others.
Or it'll just take heavy regulation or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I just get worried about. I mean, my thing is like it's okay to call something a scam if you don't think it works, but then your thing better work. And if you're telling people that you don't like this P2P currency that works perfectly, and your white paper says P2P currency, and then you're like, no, don't look at the white paper. We're doing this now. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, well then, you can't market yourself that way because people in the Bitcoin community are still marketing it as, easy safe money. They keep calling it money.
Yeah.
And it's just like, if you can't use it as money, then it's not really money. It's a store of value at that point. And so like, that's where I get, that's my frustration with the whole thing. So.
With freedom comes huge responsibility. There's a dark side to freedom. Freedom is not free. There you go. And that's not just in Bitcoin. That's P2P in general, like Cash App, right? You can get scammed on Cash App. And if you get scammed, you learn. So I think that, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier with being sort of realizing how paternalistic, the paternalistic relationship I've always had with finance. And I think that it's good for us as a species, because I actually think Bitcoin is an evolutionary tool. I really do. Like, I think that people who use Bitcoin, it stretches you, and you realize, like, I can't depend on the state to have my best interest at heart. And so I think that as a species, we're still so dependent on the state and on institutions. And I'm not saying that they don't have their place, because obviously there needs to be some. I'm not a complete anarchist where I believe that there should be no state or nothing like that. I'm not that extreme. But I do think that we need to grow up. And I think Bitcoin is one of those tools that's going to help push us along and get us to another stage of evolution. I think it's that big. Like, I think it's as big as the Magna Carta, and as big as, the printing press. And it's that big. And once people understand that, is there a drawback to that? Yeah. The drawback is you really need to be responsible.
Yeah, hopefully that happens. So I want to know about your business, FinTech Industries. You were a FinTech recruiter for a long time, and you recently started recruiting for blockchain and crypto related businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
How has that been? Have you enjoyed it? How has it been different, and how has it been challenging?
Yeah, I love it. I really, really enjoy it. And I love working with founders who are putting everything on the line, right? I'm very much, my personality is very much, when it comes to certain things, not everything, but when it comes to certain things, I love the, go big or go home sort of mentality and the audaciousness.
Risk taker.
Yeah, I am, really. I am. But it's funny because I never considered myself a gambler, right? A risk taker. I've never jumped out of an airplane. I have no intention of jumping out of an airplane. When I go to a casino, I'm the person that will play $20 on the slots and then I'm done. I'll just walk around and watch everybody else play. I don't buy lottery tickets. So the fact that I'm so invested in Bitcoin is just because it's political for me. God, where was I going?
Well, so how would it be different? I mean, if you're looking to hire people, if you're working with a founder and they need to hire developers to build their their platform, their exchange, whatever it is that they're building. Do you specifically look for people who have experience with crypto and blockchain, or would you look for developers in other areas and try to get them into these projects, or just how do you go about it?
Yeah. So that's like, oh, the story of my life, right? It's very hard, very, very hard. I initially would try and convert like regular, I call them regular people, but people who just work in, fintech companies that are not crypto related, or banks even. And I would try and, I'd have to pitch them, right? Which is what we recruiters do. We're salespeople. We really are. So we're selling a dream is pretty much what it is. And it was really hard to convince people who weren't invested in Bitcoin, or some of them would say, I've got some, but I can't, my wife would kill me. There's no way I could work for a startup and be all in, and some companies actually would pay in Bitcoin. So that was something else that would be a challenge for some people. But a lot of companies will give you a choice, right? You can accept Bitcoin or you can accept fiat. It's much easier to recruit from people that are in the space and understand it, and are willing to work for Bitcoin or willing to work with a startup. But generally speaking, right now, it's a hard market. And to get people who are not in crypto to come over and work, it's only because they believe in it politically, right? Is usually the only reason they'll come over. So, I always tend to look for people who are working on pet projects, or they've done things on their own. They might have a regular job, but they're still working on Bitcoin projects just in their spare time. But they're hard to find, as you can imagine. And then, of course, you have people based on their life stage. So the younger guys are willing to take a lot more risk. Older guys, gals, not just men. It just depends on where they are in their lives. If they just had twins, there's no way I'm gonna. So it's hard. It's not easy. Is the short answer.
Do you notice like a growth in opportunity at all? Or does that change with the market cycles? I imagine it does.
Believe it or not, there are a lot of companies that are hiring and building. I think probably the biggest announcement was Square. Square, and Jack putting his money where his mouth is and saying, hey, I really believe in this project. And as we know, Jack's pet projects tend to do very, very well because Square was a pet project, right? He was Twitter. Yeah. Twitter was the company, and he just decided to do Square as a side gig. And look at where it is now. So I think him announcing that Bitcoin was going to be another project that he would take on is huge. And so I think that a lot of companies, a lot of payment companies are paying attention to what Square is doing. They may not say it publicly, but they're paying attention. You better believe PayPal's paying attention. They're now the incumbent, right? If you're old enough, like I am, you remember when PayPal was like the radical ones, right? That were sort of coming in and saying, hey, we've got a better way of transferring money, and you could do it with email. Mm-hmm. And the banks laughing at them and thinking that they weren't even a threat. So, I think that the opportunities are there. There have been some layoffs that I know, but I think that we're in it's a weird market where people are in stealth mode, more people than you think. Some have publicly announced that they're building, like Fidelity, which is humongous. Like that's a big deal.
That blew my mind.
So that makes you kind of an insider then. If you have, maybe you don't have, perfect inside information, but being somebody who works with startups and companies as well as developers looking for work, I mean, you know who is working and you know what's being built. And even if there isn't a lot of money coming in and out of the exchanges, you have eyes on the industry growing. So would you say that we might see a bull market in the next couple of years because of that, or you just think the industry is going to eventually grow?
Yeah, I think we will definitely see a bull market. The big money, the smart money, as they call themselves, they're building the infrastructure. Like, people are really focused on the rails, if you want to call them that, the
Right.
rails. And they're working on the infrastructure. I think Jack, announcing that he was going to, give grants, right? Like, that's huge. It's so, and I think that even Fidelity, they are, as big as they are, man, they're hardcore. Like, they're the real deal. They took their time and set up miners. They mined Bitcoin for years without people knowing that's what they were doing.
That's
So
crazy.
That is crazy. So
yeah,
Fidelity, like a big investment bank, decided that they're going to invest in hardware to mine.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, they announced that they had been mining last year.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm
It was just like,
saying that out loud
whoa.
again is
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like,
Yeah.
wow. That's like, I mean, you hear about, so and so is setting up a trading desk on Wall Street or whatever, and it's like whatever. But buying hardware to mine, that's
Well, and that's the trick is the companies who are serious big players, they're not announcing it. They're announcing that they've been doing it for the last 2 years. And like they don't tell any, like you said, Nako, they're doing it in stealth mode. They don't let anybody know they're doing it, and then all of a sudden they put it out there, and you realize, oh, you've been doing this for a while now, and probably their entire Fidelity Bitcoin fund is stuff that they mine themselves.
yeah, exactly. They wanted untouched coins, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and I'm sure they're not the only one. I'm sure that there are countries that are seriously looking at Bitcoin as a reserve, or at least as a hedge, the way
Yeah.
they're looking at gold. There's no question. Like, to me, I'm sure the Russians are heavily stocking up
Oh
on
yeah,
Bitcoin. Like,
yeah.
and they're technical, like, just, they're really technical, so they get it. They get it. And,
Well, I
and
mean, same with the Chinese. Like they're the number
yeah,
one mining country in the world right now, and
yeah,
and the government has full control over every single aspect of what goes on in their country, so they know what's going on.
yeah, yep.
so ominous.
So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely, yeah, I think we're in for a bull run. I don't know when. That's the thing with Bitcoin, right? You just can't time it. I have no idea
Yeah.
when it's going to happen. I mean, the halvening is coming up, so that should be interesting. And who knows, that if the halvening doesn't trigger a bull run, I think that we're going to see a lot of capitulation with a lot of people, but I think that's a trap. Like, I'm one of those conspiracy theorists. Like, I think the powers that be, quote unquote, don't want the little guy like you and me to own Bitcoin. They do
Yeah.
not
Of
want us to
course
own
not.
it.
They don't want us to own anything. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Why would they? They want to keep their power. So that, I mean, and that goes back to my original question to you are we just passing our quote unquote freedom from one master to another with Bitcoin now because it's so manipulated and it's so
That question goes around in circles, unfortunately. It's
yeah.
like one of those things where hopefully we can see decentralization actually work. And that's the whole reason that we're here. And that's why we're friends and talking. It would be such a shame to see it just become something that is controlled by those big powers.
Well, here, I think that the miners, SegWit to me showed me that miners don't have as much power as we think they do. I used to think, oh man, the miners have all the power. Oh. But SegWit kind of changed my mind about that, because a lot of the miners threatened that they wouldn't, they wouldn't like, I guess, I don't know what the term is, but accept the signaling, that they just would, they would all go to Bitcoin Cash because they wanted bigger blocks. The miners were big block supporters. And to see that didn't happen made me realize how much power the user activated soft fork movement had. Like, before, I felt powerless as a user until that movement. And to see it actually play out the way it did. And I thought back, like, Satoshi, man, what a genius. Because he really understood that miners, at the end of the day, man, when it comes to game theory, they're going to go for the money, right? And when they realize that users like ourselves, I was one of those people that I sent all of my Bitcoin to a SegWit address to support that. I think they realized, like, we just have to go where the market goes. They're like, screw the big block. And they would go back and forth, right? They would go back and switch between Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin. Like, they are money motivated. And if, as users, if we understand the power that we have as users, this is why I think it's very important to download a full node and to run your own full node so that you can verify transactions. And I think, again, that's another huge misconception this comes with education and time. And, you kind of start to understand, this is how things work, is that although the miners are validating the transactions, the nodes, the people that run full nodes, were verifying, right? So you're not completely powerless as a hodler. You do have some power. And if we were to fork, which I think that's how we govern Bitcoin, it's messy, it's unfortunate, but that's how we govern. And we know that that's how we govern after the Bitcoin Cash split, because there were people who voted by going to the Bitcoin Cash side, which, was like, see you later, I wish them well. And I felt really torn about that whole situation, because I really liked Roger Ver. And when I came into the space, apart from Andreas, Roger was somebody that I followed and watched, a lot of what he did, and learned a lot from him. And I think he made a lot of sacrifices on behalf of the space. So it still makes me sad that, that whole split just was unfortunate. But I think that it proved to me that hodlers and people who use Bitcoin, and we're not just the developers and the miners have power. The people who actually hold or hodl, we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, the investors have power.
Yeah, the ambassadors of Bitcoin, right? So I think, so where was I going with this? Yeah, run a full node.
Run a full node if you can figure it out.
Yeah. It's funny because Mike in Space is trying to do it right now, and he's been doing it for a week, and he's been having nothing but trouble.
Well, I have a Casa node. Before I cast a node, I managed to download, but it takes a couple days. Like, it takes a while, right? This is why, imagine if we had big blocks, forget about it. It would not be a possibility. Like, this is what I tell people. Like, the reason we have SegWit and the reason we have, small blocks is so that we can run full nodes. And let me tell you, man, like, once you run it, you realize that you don't have to rely on a third party to verify and validate, to verify your transaction went through, right? You could see it yourself. You don't have to go to a block explorer and depend on the block explorer to tell you whether your transaction has gone through or not. So,
yeah, but if you're not using it as a currency anymore and you're just using it as a store of value, what do you need to confirm if you're just hodling?
Like, well, here's the thing.
You're running this node for what?
Bitcoin is can I swear on your podcast?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. I was going to say shitty. It's a shitty currency, right? But you can still use it as a currency. Like, you can. It just sucks right? But you could still you just have to wait for the validation. You just got to wait for the verification, and it wouldn't be able to process as much as Visa, but technically you could still use it. You can still use it as cash, and I think that, I think a lot of it is impatience. I think the cash part is going to take us another 20 years. I don't think it's going to be right away, and I think it's evolutionary. It's right now it's a store of value. I think it's like gold for me, but you can use it for however you see fit.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I'd love to have you come back on, and then we can start talking about alts and the idea of like which alts are better than this, because you say you were or are an altcoiner also, but you are also an advocate for Bitcoin. And I think like that could be a whole nother discussion of back to that Linux battle of should we rely just on forks, or are alts going to be a major thing? Because we have the technology, we have the ability now, not unlike in the Linux days of just starting up a whole new different build.
Hopefully I'm not a maximalist by then, but
So yeah, anyone who wants to reach out to Nako on Twitter at Nako Mbelle, which is NakoMbelle. So if you're a developer in blockchain, or if you're a founder looking for employees, hit her up. And where else can they find you, Nako?
You can email me as well at nako@fintechrecruiters.com. And I also have a website, www.fintechrecruiters.com. Yeah, but Twitter is good. So
nice. And we'll have all that in the show notes if you're interested in reaching out to her, as you should, because she's cool.
Yes.
And she likes sci-fi stuff. Drop in a little Spider-Man adjusted comment in there with your with freedom comes great power.
Yes. With great power comes great responsibility.
Oh yeah, responsibility. Yeah. Butchering it.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time, and